going to ask both of you guys the same question about Conor McGregor. Big personality, obviously, the sport's biggest personalities. But he's had, in the past 15 months or so, he's had a bit of a checkered existence. There have been a lot of, I'm going to call them off-octagon issues, if you want to call it that, or outside the octagon issues. How much of a gamble is this for UFC, Ariel, to kind of bring him back in and to put so much on this fight?
Before you say that, Ariel, I'm just going to plug your interview, because if it's the definitive Conor McGregor interview going into this. It's on the YouTube channel, the ESPN YouTube channel.
Is that the one you were watching today?
Yeah,
right?
and it's only, you don't need the plugs. You got 2 million plus views on that already. So congratulations on that. And it's a great, great interview. So now you can answer Jeff's question.
Now you can answer the question.
Well, I appreciate that very much, guys, and it's great to be back on. And it always warms my heart when Jeff, in particular, is talking about MMA, because I know he's such a big closet fan of all things mixed martial arts.
Very small closet, my friend.
Yes. Congratulations on the show, Stephen. That was great stuff with Dana. And I apologize for the noise, but it is quintessential Las Vegas. If you can hear the slot machines behind me. Yeah, it's a good scene setter. Look, I don't think it's a gamble at all, because there's been this narrative over the last few months that Conor has lost some of his popularity, and that the fans are turning on him and whatnot. And there's certainly fans who don't feel the same way that they did several years ago about him. But this gate, last I heard, was about to be around 10.6 million. The gate, meaning like the money generated from ticket sales, and it is sold out, and that would be the 5th highest gate in UFC Nevada history. So, I mean, that just speaks to the fact that this guy, who hasn't won a fight since November of 2016, hasn't fought since October of 2018, and has, as you just mentioned, Jeff, has gotten himself in a lot of hot water over the past year or so. It has been a very, very tumultuous year for him in 2019, and a lot of it, I would say the majority of it, was self-inflicted. He messed up a lot. And so, he has some work to do, but I think bringing him back is a no-brainer, because he's still the biggest star in the history of the sport.
It was interesting that the Conor McGregor that comes through in that interview, Ariel. It's look, I've heard fighters, athletes, but certainly fighters, after come back after a loss or after a tough time, or a guy like Tyson, who God knows had complications in his life, most of them self-inflicted, saying, "I'm in the best shape of my life. I changed my training regimen. I'm serious about it now. I wasn't serious about it then." And then sometimes it's true and sometimes it's not. But, he did seem, through those 40-plus minutes on that interview, in a very good place. Like, the cockiness was still there, but there was also he was kind of serene, I thought, which is not a quality I would associate with Conor McGregor.
I'm happy that you said that, because I wasn't sure if I was just, falling for it because I was sitting in front of him. I would also say he seems zen-like, and this isn't the Conor that we're used to, of course. Leading up to that interview, I talked to several members of his team, coaches, manager, etc., and they're all like, "Oh, he's different. He's happy. He's calm. He just wants no drama. He just wants to fight. He appreciates being back. He's grateful to be back, all this stuff and more." And I was like, yeah, guys, I've heard this a million times. As you just said, being around the fight game, you hear about best camp, best shape, all that stuff. And then I sat next to him for 45 or so minutes. I was like, wow, I don't know if you've changed necessarily, but you're a different person than the person that I saw in October of 2018. Prior to that Khabib Nurmagomedov fight, that was a mean build-up. That was heavy. It was so intense, and the tension was just too much. There was so much venom between them, so much vitriol. It got too personal, talking about their families and whatnot. And now we haven't had any of that leading up to this fight. And so it's been a breath of fresh air. I think if you go back to the Conor who came to the UFC in 2013, very similar to the Conor we see today. Big difference, of course, he's a multimillionaire. Back then he was on social welfare. But if you listen to him, same guy. I want to be active. I don't want to lose focus. I'm happy to be here. I don't care who's next. I just want to fight because I love the fight game. Now, does this last? We shall see. But leading up to this fight, I will say I think he has hit all the notes and has said all the right things.
I wonder if part of that, Ariel, is, and again, he's fighting Donald Cowboy Cerrone on the weekend, on Saturday. Now, that's a fight. Matchmaking in UFC is different than in MMA is different than it is in boxing. But if he was a boxer, they would bring him back and put him in with an opponent who would make him look good and make him feel confident. And I wonder if a part of this, going in against Khabib, a guy who never lost and was, is a monster, and who beat him. he's got to feel pretty confident going in against Cerrone, a guy they've talked about fighting in the past. He knows him really well. I wonder if that's part of it, that there is no, like, he could lose, but I think this fight is designed for him to win and designed for him to look good.
Yes, absolutely. And when I spoke to Conor in August, after the video emerged of him punching that old man in the bar, that was a real, that was a real black eye on his career, and he was receiving a lot of hate, and rightfully so. And he recognized that. And so I spoke to him in August, and he apologized, and he seemed very contrite and apologetic. But in that interview, he told me, like, I want to come back and I want to fight Khabib. And I thought, and I said to him, why would you come back and fight Khabib? But there's nothing wrong with a quote-unquote tune-up fight. We see this in boxing all the time. Remember, when Mike Tyson came back after his long layoff, he fought Peter McNeely. Now, Donald Cerrone is not Peter McNeely by any stretch of the imagination. Donald Cerrone is the winningest fighter in UFC history. This is a guy who has fought for the title in the UFC and other organizations, but the knock on him has been that he doesn't win the big one. He stumbles when he's on the biggest stage. And also, another knock on him going into this fight is that he has lost his last two in a row. And also, he got stopped in his last two in a row. So maybe his confidence is a little rocky right now. But he's a true cowboy. This is not just a gimmick. He's a guy who doesn't care who he fights, when he fights, all that stuff and more. And he's always game. But yes, this fight is, in my opinion, designed to get Conor back. But it's not a bomb that he's fighting. It's not a can or a cupcake or anything like that. This guy's legit.
Yeah.
And one key thing about this fight that I think they may have miscalculated on it, because I think the opponent was right. But one thing that I didn't agree with, and I still don't agree with, is making the fight at 170 pounds. I think Conor is at his best when he's fighting at 155, and he agreed to do this fight at 170 because he didn't want to cut that weight. Cerrone is better at 170. I thought he should have made him cut down to 155 to have the advantage, but he feels more comfortable at 170 right now.
It's interesting you say that, because there's Business Insider did an article on the on sort of the the business, updating the business of the UFC, and one of the things they did is they showed two pictures of Conor McGregor. They showed Conor McGregor's current body and Conor McGregor's body when he was lighter. But between lightweight and welterweight, I mean, is there a path here for him to regain a title, Ariel? Do you think?
Well, yes, there is a path. And by the way, when he first came to the UFC, he was fighting at 145. And
right.
That's probably the photo you're talking. Like when he was fighting at 145, when he would step on the scales, he looked gaunt. He looked unhealthy. He looked like a skeleton. And at 170, he looks obviously very, very healthy and very fit. But I feel like 155 is the prime weight class for him. I think at 170, if he wants to try to go for the belt there, he is going to be fighting guys who are a lot bigger than him. For those fans that don't know, just because they weigh in on Friday at 170 doesn't mean they actually fight at 170. In the span of the 24 hours between the weigh-ins and the fight, some of these guys can add 20 or so pounds. He's just not that big. He doesn't have to cut any weight when he's fighting at 170. So I think the prime spot for him is 155, the lightweight division, and that's the division where he won the belt a couple of years ago against Eddie Alvarez. The issue right now for him is Khabib Nurmagomedov, 28-0, in my opinion, the most dominant fighter in UFC history. He's the champion there, and he's the guy who beat him back in October of 2018. And his skill set is a big problem for Conor's because he's such a great grappler and wrestler, and Conor is more of a striker. So that's the problem right now. But to be honest, like you just said, this is the UFC. They can make title fights whenever. So he wins this fight. Dana White has said, we're going to try to make that title fight again. It's not like he has to go on a 10-fight winning streak to get that back.
But, Ariel, that's why I wonder. Why? Because, again, let's assume he wins tomorrow night. If he doesn't win, we're having a whole other conversation. I know guys can come back from a loss and all of that, but that would be a shocker. If you're the UFC, and even if you're McGregor, he's talking about fighting a couple more times this year, maybe 3 times more this year, that would be a stretch. But why would you lead him back to Khabib? If, from the promotion's point of view and from his point of view, because I know he wants to avenge the loss and everything, but as you said, it's an incredibly tough style match for him.
You direct him more to welterweight, would you?
Well, I would just direct him through guys. There's a bunch of other matches you can make. He's the star. He's a huge attribute. You just see, he's going to do a huge gate against Donald Cerrone. Why would you lead him into a fight that I think he would probably lose again, and he wouldn't look good losing? Why wouldn't you, take some other attractive matchups and just milk the Conor McGregor appeal out there? And again, he could win a championship and do that, and maybe you bring him back to Khabib eventually. But I wouldn't be in any rush to do that. I'm not sure why you would be.
Couldn't agree more. 100%. In my opinion, you keep him away from Khabib. If he is going to fight 3 times this year, I don't want any of those fights to be against Khabib. Khabib's not going anywhere anytime soon. The guy's only lost 1 round in his UFC career. And by the way, that round was against Conor McGregor. And I will say that performance for Conor, for whatever reason, hasn't aged particularly well. But if you go back and watch it, Conor actually did very well against Khabib. I know he lost in the 4th round and was submitted, but he won a round, which no one else has. And actually in the 1st round, Khabib had a tough time taking him down, which no one expected. That being said, right now, Khabib is just incredible. 28-0 is unbelievable. If I were managing his career, look, whatever the UFC wants is one thing, but his team, Conor's team, have to look out for his best interest. If I'm managing his career, I recognize the fact that Conor versus a broomstick does this kind of business.
Yeah.
It didn't matter who he was fighting in the return fight. He was getting $10 million gate and all this other stuff, regardless of who was going against him, Cerrone or anyone else. So if I win this fight, I'm looking at 3 guys. Justin Gaethje, who's a top contender at 155, and I think has a style that's very good for Conor. He's been talking a lot of smack about Conor. Sure, take that fight. It's great. It could be another main event. Nate Diaz, they have the 2 great fights against each other, do the trilogy. Who would say no to that? And then the other one, probably the biggest of the trio, Jorge Masvidal, who's now fighting at 170, but has fought at 155. He's just supremely popular, striker as well, and I think that would do monstrous business.
Yeah, those are 3 huge fights. Now, the other thing he talks about in your interview is the possibility of going back to boxing, which he seems positive about. You and I both covered the Mayweather fight, and I said compliments to all the people who promoted it, made all that money, and convinced people that it was going to be a contest. Again, maybe you could pull that again. Ariel, I'm not sure you could do it with Mayweather.
I was going to say,
maybe
why would you? But it's money.
Well, because he made more money doing that fight than anything he's ever done in UFC. Right. Everybody made more money than they've ever made. He's talked about Pacquiao, which, would be, I'd pay to watch it. I'm not sure what would happen. Do you think that makes sense? And again, I always, follow the money. It makes sense. But do you put it this way? Do you think you can? That is as promotable. It's not as promotable as it was the first time, but could you convince people to lay down the way they did the first time around?
By the way, Stephen, I just got chills when you said follow the money, because I remember being on air with you a couple of years ago when I was poo-pooing the idea of Mayweather-McGregor, and you said follow the money, and you predicted it was going to happen. And so here we are again.
Everyone said, broken clock twice a day, right? Yeah, that's one of those things.
That's right. I will just say that, from being in tune with the fans, I don't see many people clamoring for this. And of course, this is always a tricky thing. You listen to Twitter, and we sometimes put too much stock into that. But I think MMA fans love Conor McGregor, and they want to see him compete in mixed martial arts the same way basketball fans wanted to see Michael Jordan go back to basketball and stop with the baseball stuff. And so right now, if we're going to do this whole he's back, redemption, he's going to go for the belt, all this stuff, they don't want to see him get off track and go to boxing, because I think a lot of people look back at Mayweather McGregor, while it was fun in the moment, as kind of like the beginning of this downfall. This is where everything went wrong. He made all the money and then all the stuff afterwards. And look, he also told me in that interview, if all goes to plan and the pay-per-view does as well as he thinks it's going to do, he thinks he can make $80 million for this fight. That's absolutely absurd. I never thought at this point in the game, UFC just 26 years young, I never thought anyone would make anywhere close to $80 million. Now, that's not guaranteed. That's after the pay-per-view. But that's pretty darn close to what he made against Mayweather. So he doesn't need to do this. But, yeah, of course, it's a spectacle. It's a big deal. So if you tell me it doesn't make sense, to your point, business, dollars, cents, it all makes sense. But if you're asking me what I would like, and if you're asking me what I would advise him to do, just stick to what you're good at, man. Stick to MMA, fight those guys, and keep making this kind of money. Yeah,
it's a huge number. I heard now when he was talking to you about that, and again, I think his purse per se will be what, $5 million or something for this fight, or something in that range, I would think. But
it'll be closer to 10.
10, okay. But did he? He was talking about Canadian pay-per-view, Australian pay-per-view. Does he own those as part of this? Because that's kind of what I thought was implied there. That as part of his deal, maybe they cut those pieces off and said these are yours.
Yes. So what happens is in the UFC, if you're a champion or someone of his stature, you get what's called pay-per-view points. So there's thresholds. So just for example, this was the old threshold before they moved their pay-per-view to ESPN Plus here in America when it was on DirecTV and all those places. It would basically be like every buy above 250,000 buys, you'll get, say, 50 cents. So like if it's 275, you'll get 50 cents for those 25,000 more buys. So he has an investment in promoting the fight. This is why you're seeing him do a lot of media and all this stuff leading up to this fight. So that's what he means by that. So he's estimating that the pay-per-view is going to do X, Y, and Z in all these different markets, and based off of the thresholds and the negotiations and what they, the deal that they cut with the UFC, he's going to make X amount from that. But as far as his guaranteed, and by the way, $10 million for Conor McGregor is a steal. Like when you look at what some of these other boxers are making right now, and you consider the impact that he has and the media that he generates, I think that the UFC is getting a steal. And I think he does want to fight a lot, and I think he is really honest about that. But I think he gave them kind of a hometown discount, if you can believe that. I know $10 million is a lot of money, but I think he just wanted to get back in there, get this win. And I think the next time around for the next fight, then they're going to have some tough negotiation.
Ariel, what are you going to be watching for early in this?
Well, whether or not Donald Cerrone is actually being honest when he says that he's going to keep this fight standing, because I think most people agree that his better path to victory is trying to take this fight to the ground because he's better on the ground. He has better grappling and jiu-jitsu skills than Conor McGregor. I want to see how Conor comes out. Is he going to come out aggressive like he has in the past? And the main, theme that everyone agrees on is if this fight goes into the championship rounds, meaning the fourth and fifth round, that probably suits Cerrone more. He's got better cardio, better gas tank, all that stuff. For Conor to win, it's probably in his best interest to try to end the fight in the first or the second. So I want to see how aggressive he comes out and whether or not he's able to keep the fight standing.
What's did you? I don't know if you've put down a prediction on this one, Ariel, but what's your call in this fight?
Well, I hope you don't criticize me for this, but I made a rule a long time ago that I don't make predictions, if only because I got to tell you, fighters are incredibly sensitive. Witness the fact, guys, that Donald Cerrone is very mad at me right now. He refused to talk. I've been covering Donald Cerrone for over 10 years, and I'm sure you guys all have your own stories like this, way more than I do. I've been covering this guy prior to UFC. We've always had a great relationship. But I said a year ago, in January of last year, I said I thought he was going about trying to get this fight the wrong way. He was being too nice. He was saying to Conor, hey, Conor, I would love to fight you. It would be an honor to share the octagon with you. And I was like, Donald, you're the winningest fighter in UFC history. Act like it, man. Tell him that he should come fight you. Tell him that it should be his honor to fight you. And he thought that I was being too critical and disrespecting him. So he is mad at me, refusing to talk to me, and has told his whole team that they can't talk to me. So why do I say that? Because when I pick one guy or the other, then I have to deal with all this nonsense afterwards. I will say, though, so I'm not totally sitting on the fence, if the fight goes, long, it favors Cerrone. If it's a short fight, it favors Conor. And I'll also say, if you look at the odds, I think Vegas has this one right. Last I checked, it's around minus 330, I believe, for Conor. I think that's an accurate line.
Well, what that means, Ariel, of course, is that people are reading and listening and watching you. So there you go.
Yes.
That's not a bad thing.
I mean, come on, guys. You're cage fighters. I thought your skin was supposed to be a little thicker than that.
Ariel, thanks for doing this. Always a pleasure, man. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.